The movie industry is often a funny beast. There can be films that feel like can't-miss nailed-on hits ahead of their theatrical release, yet ultimately those offering stutter to box office disappointment. But on the other hand, there are those movies that we all know and love that we presume dominated at movie theaters. But the honest truth is that the cinema run of these films was abysmal compared to the success they saw on the small screen. With that in mind, I'm Gareth from WhatCulture.com, and here are 10 movies nobody saw in cinemas but everyone watches on TV. Number 10. Labyrinth. It's crazy to think that people just didn't flock to cinemas to see Labyrinth. I mean, plentiful great Jim Henson puppet creations, wondrous landscapes, David Bowie, what's not to love? But the film just didn't really find an audience until it made its way onto television. For context, the Henson-directed 1986 release made barely half of its budget back during its theatrical run. When thinking back, Labyrinth is the sort of movie we all think would have had masses of families heading to their nearest multiplex or local independent cinema. Yet that just wasn't the case in the end. Now though, if you stumble across Labyrinth when channel surfing, it's pretty much a no-brainer that the vast majority of people will pause what they're doing and indulge in Jim Henson's 1986 classic. Number 9. The Wizard of Oz. 1939's The Wizard of Oz is a film that the vast majority of cineasts have seen and adored. When the picture was released to theaters though, it quite frankly tanked. Costing $3 million to make, The Wizard of Oz actually lost $1.1 million for MGM, and was initially viewed as a calamitous failure. The true success of The Wizard of Oz came when it began to air annually on CBS in the United States, and it wasn't until the 1950s that the movie started to slowly get the recognition it so rightly deserved, with many becoming instantly enamored upon a first watch of Victor Fleming's movie. And we've been following that yellow brick road ever since. Number 8. Blade Runner. Blade Runner is one of the absolute greatest sci-fi movies of all time. Aesthetically, the movie is a thing of sheer beauty, and the story at the center of the film is something that many still debate to this day. Going back 40 years though, and Blade Runner didn't particularly set the world alight when it was first unleashed on multiplexes. A solid $41 million return on its $30 million budget wasn't exactly awful, but Warner Brothers had major hopes that the film would amass gigantic revenue. One significant factor in Blade Runner not exactly hitting the heights that Warner's had hoped for was probably the sheer competition that the movie opened up alongside, with Blade Runner hitting cinemas at the same time as E.T. the Extraterrestrial, Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan, The Thing, and Conan the Barbarian. Yikes. Of course though, the sheer magnetism of Blade Runner ultimately resulted in the film being an absolute can't miss each time it's been shown on TV in the years after its initial release. Number 7. Heathers. When people think of those movies labeled cult classics, one that forever springs to mind is 1989's Heathers. And while certain other such cult hits found their audience upon getting a DVD or Blu-ray release, for Heathers it was a case of its popularity getting a major shot in the arm upon landing on TV. During its cinema run, it was a vastly different story for Michael Lehmann's movie, with the picture being a financial failure, taking home just $1.1 million at the box office from a budget of $3 million. However, slowly but surely, Heathers began to build momentum, with TV airings of the movie causing an increasing amount of people to realize that yes, the film was actually pretty damn good. Well, grim and dour at times, but pretty damn good nonetheless. Number 6. It's a Wonderful Life. When thinking of the absolute best Christmas movies, many would settle on 1946's It's a Wonderful Life as the greatest festive picture that there is. And yes, they'd be correct. Like the rest of the films featured on this list though, It's a Wonderful Life only truly found appreciation when it landed on TV. Upon its theatrical run, It's a Wonderful Life barely made back its budget, bringing home $3.3 million from its $3.2 million layout. For whatever reason, the film just didn't find an audience during its initial release. But still, that's not stopped it from going on to become a must-watch TV event for so many people every time the holiday season comes a-calling. Number 5. This is Spinal Tap. Few films conjure up quite as many laughs on repeat viewings as This Is Spinal Tap. Sure, there are a few other daft comedies that have the same quality to them, with Step Brothers, Ace Ventura, Pet Detective, and Dumb and Dumber, just a few select films that remain entertainingly hilarious whenever you watch them back. The difference between those three films and This Is Spinal Tap, though, is that trio of pictures all did huge numbers during their theatrical runs. Whereas This Is Spinal Tap, well, people just opted to avoid it at cinemas for the most part. To be clear, This Is Spinal Tap managed to turn a modest profit during its initial theatrical run, but the masses seemed a tad confused by the fictional Spinal Tap band itself. Given the way the movie is presented, people believed that Spinal Tap were a real band, but with nobody having actually heard of Spinal Tap, why would large numbers of people rush to see a documentary about a rock group they knew next to nothing about? You can see the problem. Thankfully, the VHS release of This Is Spinal Tap started to cause some mild buzz for the film, and that buzz was amplified tenfold when the picture began to screen on TV. In the years since then, the movie has become one of those that you simply have to watch whenever the opportunity arises. Number 4, Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. Revered as a legendary movie by so many people who have seen the picture so many times over the decades, Mel Stewart's Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory actually struggled to find an audience when the film was first delivered to cinemagoers. Unfortunately, the movie only amassed $4.5 million at the box office, which proved to be a major disappointment for Paramount Pictures. The initial theatrical release of the picture did earn solid reviews from those who saw it, but it was only when Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory started hitting TV screens in the 1980s that the film saw a massive jolt in the arm when it comes to popularity. Since then, the 1971 antics of Willy Wonka and Charlie Bucket and Co. have continued to be a constant TV favorite for generation after generation. Number 3, numerous John Carpenter movies. In 1978's Halloween, John Carpenter has a movie that spent decades classified as the most profitable film in all of cinema history. Away from Halloween, however, it's a tad bizarre to realize that shockingly few people flock to cinemas to see some of Carpenter's other works, even though so many people hold much of the iconic horror master's work in the highest of regard. And said pictures will forever be watched time and time again when found playing on TV. When you think of Big Trouble in Little China, The Thing, and They Live, they're all films that most of us will happily sit and watch whenever they're on TV. The thing is though, no, not that thing, all three of those weren't exactly watched by all that many people when they were released theatrically. In the case of Big Trouble, that 1986 release cost up to $25 million by the time all was said and done. Yet the box office haul from the picture was just $11 million. For The Thing and They Live, those movies fared a bit better at the box office, but they still fell way below what 20th Century Fox and Universal Pictures respectively were expecting. Thankfully though, they all managed to secure a place in our hearts once they began to spread across the small screen. Number 2, The Iron Giant. 1999's The Iron Giant is a brilliant movie that many look back on fondly. Yet this was again a film that people, for the most part, avoided at the cinema. What is wrong with us? This is a picture that so many hold up as one of the greatest animated movies in history. But it's a film that massively derailed the animation arm of what Warner Brothers would hope could somehow rival the output of Disney. A robot arriving from space to befriend a lonely young boy in 1950s America is the stuff of heartwarming dreams. But it's a heartwarming dream that wasn't experienced by most until TV showings of the movie. To indicate just how poorly The Iron Giant did during its cinema run, the Brad Bird-directed effort didn't even make its budget back at the box office. Again though, The Iron Giant is something that so many will just drop everything to watch as and when it's airing on TV. And for good reason, it's bloody great. Number 1, The Shawshank Redemption. When people think of The Shawshank Redemption, they think of a true all-time classic of cinema, and rightly so, for the film received an incredible 7 nominations at the 1995 Academy Awards. The truth of the matter, though, is that the vast majority of Shawshank fans never actually saw the movie in cinemas. Instead, it was the first run of TV showings of the film that caused the picture to prove as popular as it became. Upon its release in 1994, Frank Darabont's adaptation of Stephen King's Rita Hayworth and Shawshank Redemption Redemption novel was anything but a box office hit. Having cost $25 million to make, The Shawshank Redemption's initial cinema run saw it bring home only $16 million. Critical praise and the many subsequent award nominations would prove to be a major factor in people giving The Shawshank Redemption a shot on VHS, and when it first started to air on TV. As for why the picture's cinema run was a bust, the reasons given range from audiences being confused by the movie's title, I know we're a simple bunch, to an overall lack of interest in prison set films, to The Shawshank Redemption hitting theaters at the same time as Pulp Fiction and Forrest Gump, which, to be fair, is rather insane competition for even the mightiest of flicks. And that's our list. Know of any other movies nobody saw in cinemas but everyone watches on TV? Let us know all about them in the comments section right down below, and don't forget to like, share and click on that subscribe button. I've been Gareth from WhatCulture.com, thank you very much for watching, and I'm sure I'll see you very, very soon.